Dr. Kim Woojin stepped out of his transport vehicle and looked across the rocky landscape of Kepler 442b. The red sun hung low in the purple sky, casting long shadows between the tall mining towers. He had been working on this frontier planet for 3 years now, studying the strange animals and plants that lived here. Most days were quiet and boring, just the way he liked them. Today was different. The mining crew had called him early that morning. They found something unusual near the new excavation site, something that made even the tough miners nervous. Woojin grabbed his equipment bag and headed toward the coordinates they gave him. The mining site was a mess. Giant machines had torn deep holes in the ground, searching for the rare metals hidden beneath the surface. Piles of broken rock and twisted metal pipes lay scattered everywhere. The air smelled of burned fuel and disturbed earth. "Over here, Doc," called out mine foreman Kang Min-jae. The big man waved Woojin toward a large crater near the edge of the dig site. "We found them about an hour ago. Nobody wants to get close." Woojin walked carefully down the slope into the crater. At the bottom, hidden behind a fallen boulder, he saw what had frightened the miners. It was a nest, but not like any bird nest he had ever seen. This one was made of metal scraps, bones, and some kind of dark, sticky substance. It was nearly 2 meters wide and deep enough for a grown man to lie down in. Inside the nest were 3 small creatures. Woojin's heart nearly stopped. He knew exactly what he was looking at. These were Vorthak cubs, and they were barely alive. The Vorthak were the most feared predators in known space. Adult Vorthak stood 3 meters tall on their powerful hind legs. They had 6 limbs total. 2 legs and 4 arms, each ending in claws that could cut through steel. Their heads were long and narrow, filled with rows of sharp teeth. Their skin was covered in dark scales that could deflect most energy weapons. Every spacer in the galaxy knew stories about Vorthak attacks. They hunted in packs, moved faster than most ships could escape, and showed no mercy to any living thing they encountered. Entire colonies had been destroyed by Vorthak raids. The Galactic Council had classified them as a Class 5 hostile species. That meant shoot on sight. No questions asked, but these were not the terrifying monsters from the stories. These were babies. The 3 cubs were about the size of house cats, though their bodies were longer and thinner. Their scales were soft and pale gray, not the hard black armor of adults. Their claws were tiny and dull. One of the cubs was not moving at all. The other 2 barely lifted their heads when Woojin approached. They were starving. Woojin activated his communication device. "Dr. Park, I need you to come to Sector 7 immediately. Bring the emergency medical kit." "What did you find out there? Woojin?" Dr. Park Nari's voice crackled through the speaker. She was his research partner and the only other xenobiologist on the planet. "I cannot explain over the comm. Just hurry." 20 minutes later, Park Nari arrived at the crater. She took one look at the nest and went completely white. "Are those what I think they are?" "Vorthak cubs. 3 of them. They need help right now." "Woojin, no." Nari shook her head quickly. "We cannot touch them. It is too dangerous. We need to call Administrator Lee immediately." "Look at them, Nari. They are dying. How can they be dangerous?" "Because they are. Vorthak. Even the babies are deadly. Everyone knows that." Woojin knelt down next to the nest. The largest cub, no bigger than his hand, struggled to lift its head. Its eyes were barely open, but when it looked at him, Woojin saw something that surprised him. The cub was afraid. It was not showing aggression or hunting instincts. It was just a scared, hungry baby animal. "They are not monsters," Woojin said quietly. "They are children." Before Nari could stop him, Woojin reached into the nest. The cub that had looked at him tried to move away, but was too weak. When Woojin's fingers touched its soft scales, the cub made a small sound. Not a growl or a hiss, but something that sounded almost like crying. "Woojin, "Do not do this," Nari whispered. "If Administrator Lee finds out, he will send us both back to Earth in prison transport." But Wu Jin was not listening anymore. The cub had wrapped one tiny claw around his finger. The grip was weak but determined. The small creature looked up at him with dark eyes that seemed to be asking for help. "I am taking them back to the research station," Wu Jin said. "That is completely against protocol. There are 17 different galactic laws about containing hostile species. The Vorthak are at the top of the dangerous list. These are not hostile. They are babies who need food and medical care." Wu Jin carefully lifted the first cub. It was surprisingly light, probably weighing less than 2 kilograms. Its body felt warm against his hands. The cub made that crying sound again, but it did not try to bite or scratch him. Nari watched in horror as Wu Jin gently placed the cub in his equipment bag, then reached for the second one. "The Administrator will have you arrested. The Galactic Council will shut down our entire research program." "Then we will not tell him yet," Wu Jin replied. He picked up the second cub, which was even smaller than the first. This one was barely breathing. "Help me with the third one." "I cannot be part of this madness." Wu Jin looked at his friend and colleague. They had worked together for 5 years. She was a good scientist and a caring person. But fear was making her forget both of those things. "Nari, look at them. Really look at them. What do you see?" Against her better judgment, Nari looked down at the third cub. This one was the smallest and weakest of the group. Its breathing was shallow and irregular. As she watched, it tried to crawl toward the spot where its siblings had been lying. When it could not find them, it made a soft whimpering sound. "I see 3 baby animals who are going to die if we do nothing," she said finally. Exactly. Together, they carefully moved all 3 cubs from the nest. Wu Jin carried them in his equipment bag, while Nari gathered samples of the nest material for later study. The walk back to the research station seemed to take forever. At the station, they set up a temporary habitat in Wu Jin's private laboratory. They used heating lamps to keep the cubs warm and prepared a mixture of protein paste and vitamin supplements that might be suitable for young Vorthak metabolism. The smallest cub died that night despite their efforts, but the other 2 began to show signs of improvement. They drank the nutrient mixture eagerly and seemed to grow stronger by the hour. As Wu Jin watched the 2 surviving cubs sleep curled up together under the heat lamp, he wondered what he had just started. He knew Nari was right about the laws and the risks. But when he looked at these small creatures, he could not see the galaxy's most feared predators. He saw 2 babies who needed someone to take care of them. Outside the laboratory window, the red sun of Kepler 442b was setting again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult decisions. Administrator Lee would eventually find out what they were hiding in the lab. The Galactic Council would demand answers. But tonight, 2 Vorthak cubs were safe, warm, and no longer alone. Wu Jin had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change the entire galaxy forever. 3 months had passed since Dr. Kim Wu Jin found the cubs in the mining crater. The 2 survivors had grown much bigger than anyone expected. What started as tiny creatures no larger than house cats were now the size of medium dogs. Their soft gray scales had darkened to deep silver, and their claws had grown sharp and strong. Wu Jin had named them based on their different personalities. The larger one he called Shadow Claw, because it liked to hide in dark corners and watch everything quietly. The smaller but more active one became Swift Strike because it moved incredibly fast when playing or hunting for food. Dr. Park Nari stood outside the expanded habitat they had built in the main laboratory. She watched through the reinforced glass as Wu Jin sat on the floor inside, feeding both cubs from bottles filled with protein mixture. The cubs sat on either side of him like well-behaved pets. "I still cannot believe what I am seeing," Nari said to herself. 3 months ago, she had been terrified of these creatures. The entire galaxy knew that Vorthak were killing machines that could not be tamed or controlled. Yet here were two young Vorthak acting like friendly animals around. Humans. Shadowclaw finished drinking and immediately curled up against Wu Jin's side. The cub began making a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through its chest. It sounded almost like the purring of a giant cat. Swift Strike was more playful. After finishing its bottle, it began chasing a ball that Wu Jin rolled across the floor. The cub's movements were incredibly quick and graceful. Its four arms moved in perfect coordination as it caught the ball and brought it back. "They are nothing like the reports describe," Nari said when Wu Jin came out of the habitat. "That is because those reports are about wild adult Vorthak," Wu Jin replied. "These two have been raised with care and affection. They see us as their Ao family." The proof of this bond had become stronger every day. The cubs followed Wu Jin everywhere he went in the research station. When he worked at his desk, they lay quietly nearby. When he slept, they curled up on the floor next to his bed. If he left the station without them, they became restless and made sad crying sounds until he returned. "Administrator Lee has been asking more questions," Nari warned. "He knows we are hiding something in the lab. The food supplies we have been ordering are too large for just our normal research." Lee Do-hyun was the colony administrator for the entire Kepler 442b settlement. He was a strict man who followed regulations exactly. If he discovered two Vorthak cubs living in their research station, he would follow Galactic law and have them destroyed immediately. "We need more time," Wu Jin said. "They are learning so fast. Shadowclaw already understands basic hand signals. Swift Strike has figured out how to open simple containers. They are intelligent, Nari. More intelligent than most of the supposedly civilized species in the galaxy." As if to prove his point, Shadowclaw approached the habitat door and pressed a specific sequence of buttons that opened the lock. This was not something Wu Jin had taught the cub. Shadowclaw had learned it by watching humans enter and exit dozens of times. "That is exactly what worries me," Nari said. "Smart predators are more dangerous, not less." But even as she said it, Nari did not really believe her own words anymore. Over the past months, she had watched the cubs play, learn, and interact with humans. They showed curiosity, affection, and even what seemed like concern for human emotions. Last week, when Nari had injured her hand on a sharp piece of equipment, both cubs had become agitated. They stayed close to her all day, making soft, worried sounds. Swift Strike had even brought her one of its favorite toys, as if trying to make her feel better. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning. Wu Jin was in the habitat with both cubs when the automated mining equipment outside malfunctioned. A massive drill assembly broke free from its support cables and came crashing down toward the research station. The impact shook the entire building and sent equipment flying in every direction. Nari had been standing near a tall shelf, filled with heavy scientific instruments when the building shook. The shelf began to tip forward, dozens of metal devices, and glass containers started falling toward her. She tried to move, but slipped on some spilled chemicals from a broken beaker. The heavy shelf was going to crush her. Shadowclaw saw what was happening through the habitat's glass wall. The 6-month-old cub moved faster than any human could. It slammed into the habitat door so hard that the reinforced glass cracked. The door burst open and Shadowclaw launched itself across the laboratory. The cub reached Nari just as the shelf was about to hit her. Shadowclaw used its powerful body to shield her from the falling equipment. Heavy metal instruments crashed down on the cub's back and sides. Glass containers shattered against its scales. When everything stopped falling, Shadowclaw lay motionless on top of Nari. Dark blue blood seeped from cuts on its head and legs. The cub had taken the full impact to protect the human who had once been afraid of it. "Shadowclaw!" Wu Jin cried out as he rushed to help. Swift Strike was right behind him, making distressed sounds as it saw its sibling injured. Nari carefully moved out from under the wounded cub. She was completely unhurt, but Shadowclaw was badly injured. The cub's breathing was shallow and its eyes were closed. Why did it do that? Nari whispered. Why would it risk its life to save me? Wu Jin was already treating Shadow Claw's wounds with medical supplies. Because it considers you part of its pack, part of its family. Vorthak are pack hunters. They protect their pack members even at the cost of their own lives. But I am not Vorthak. I am not even the same species. That does not matter to them. We raised them with love and care. We are their family now. It took 3 days for Shadowclaw to fully recover from its injuries. During that time, both cubs stayed close to Nari. They seemed to understand that she had been hurt and that Shadowclaw had protected her. The bond between the humans and cubs grew even stronger. Dr. Choi Hyejin arrived at the research station 1 week later. She was an animal behavior specialist from Earth who had been sent to investigate reports of unusual activity on Kepler 442b. The Galactic Research Council had received requests for large amounts of specialized food and medical supplies. They wanted to know why a small mining planet needed resources typically used for dangerous predator species. Wu Jin knew they could not hide the cubs anymore. Too many people were asking questions. Too many supply requests had been filed. It was time to tell the truth and hope that Hyejin would understand. Dr. Choi, I need to show you something that will change everything you think you know about Vorthak, Wu Jin said when she arrived. He led her to the laboratory where both cubs were playing with puzzle toys. They looked up when the humans entered and approached curiously. Neither cub showed any signs of aggression toward the stranger. Hyejin's face went pale when she realized what she was looking at. Those are Vorthak cubs, alive, in your laboratory. Their names are Shadowclaw and Swift Strike, Wu Jin said calmly. They have been living with us for 3 months. They are not the monsters the galaxy believes them to be. As if understanding that they were being discussed, Shadowclaw approached Hyejin slowly. The cub sat down a meter away from her and made a soft questioning sound. It tilted its head to one side, watching her with intelligent dark eyes. It is asking if you are friendly, Wu Jin explained. They can sense human emotions very well. Hyejin stared at the young Vorthak. Everything she had learned in school said this creature should be trying to kill her. Instead, it was sitting politely and waiting to see if she wanted to be friends. This changes everything, she said quietly. If Vorthak can be socialized like this, then everything we think we know about predator species might be wrong. Swift Strike brought Hyejin one of its toys, a simple ball made from scraps of metal. The cub dropped it at her feet and backed away, clearly inviting her to play. For the first time in galactic history, a human reached down and picked up a toy offered by a Vorthak. When Hyejin threw the ball across the room, both cubs chased after it eagerly, their movements fluid and graceful. They are not monsters, Hyejin said in amazement. They are just children who needed a family. Outside the research station, the red sun was setting over the mining colonies. In a few days, Hyejin would send her report to the Galactic Research Council. That report would change everything. But tonight, 2 Vorthak cubs played happily with their human family, unaware that they were about to become the most important animals in the galaxy. 1 year had passed since Dr. Kim Wu Jin first found the 3 cubs in the mining crater. Now, Shadowclaw and Swift Strike were no longer small creatures that could curl up in his lap. They had grown to the size of large Earth tigers, though their bodies were longer and more flexible. Their silver scales had darkened to deep charcoal, and their claws could easily cut through metal. But despite their fearsome appearance, they remained gentle with their human family. Engineer Yu Minho discovered something amazing about the cubs by accident. He was working on a broken air filtration system in the research station when both Vorthak approached him. Instead of staying back like most animals would, they watched his work with obvious interest. "What are you 2 looking at?" Minho asked them. Shadowclaw made a series of clicking sounds and pointed one claw at a loose connection in the machinery. Swift Strike moved to the other side of the device and tapped on a damaged component with careful precision. you can see. What is wrong with this thing? Minho asked in surprise. Both cubs nodded their heads. This was something new. Over the past year, they had learned to understand human speech quite well, but complex technical knowledge was unexpected. Minho decided to test them further. He pointed to his toolbox and made a gesture asking for a specific wrench. Shadowclaw immediately found the correct tool and handed it to him. When Minho needed to reach a difficult spot inside the machine, Swift Strike used its longer arms to make the repair for him. Dr. Woojin needs to see this, Minho said to himself. From that day forward, the two Vorthak became unofficial members of the maintenance crew. Their natural strength allowed them to lift heavy equipment that normally required 3 humans. Their flexible bodies could reach into spaces too small for human workers. Most importantly, they seemed to understand how complex machinery worked, just by watching it operate. They are learning faster than any species we have ever studied, Dr. Park Nari reported during their weekly research meeting. Their intelligence levels are remarkable. Dr. Choi Hyejin had been living at the research station for 6 months now, documenting everything about the cub's development. Her reports to the Galactic Research Council were causing significant debate throughout civilized space. The implications are staggering, Hyejin said. If Vorthak can be successfully integrated into civilized society, we need to reconsider our policies toward dozens of other predator species. But not everyone was happy about these discoveries. The story had spread across galactic communication networks despite official attempts to suppress it. Some species expressed curiosity about the human experiments with Vorthak cubs. Others reacted with horror and fear. The strongest opposition came from the hegemony of Krelthak, a militaristic alliance that had fought brutal wars against wild Vorthak for centuries. Commander Krelvas himself sent threatening messages to the Galactic Council demanding immediate action. The humans are creating super predators, his message declared. Vorthak with intelligence and emotions are far more dangerous than wild ones. This experiment must be stopped before it threatens all civilized life. Trade routes began avoiding the Kepler 442b system entirely. Supply ships refused to dock at the colony. The mining operations started running short on essential materials. Administrator Lee Do-yun finally confronted Woojin about the situation. I know what you are hiding in that laboratory, Lee said during a private meeting. The entire galaxy is talking about 2 Vorthak cubs living with humans on my planet. Do you understand what you have done to us? We have proven that intelligence and compassion can overcome fear and prejudice, Woojin replied calmly. You have made us outcasts. No civilized species wants contact with a world that harbors Vorthak. Our mining contracts are being canceled. Our supply shipments are stopped. This colony will fail because of your experiment. The colony will thrive because of what we have learned here. Give us time to prove it. Before Lee could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. Emergency lights flashed red as automated systems announced a critical situation. Attention all personnel. Galactic Council inspection vessel approaching. All staff report to designated positions. Immediately. Through the laboratory windows, they could see a massive ship descending from orbit. It was a Council enforcement vessel, the kind used for investigating dangerous situations throughout the galaxy. They are here to shut us down, Lee said grimly. The inspection team was led by Counselor Vextar, a stern member of the Galactic Council who had personal experience fighting wild Vorthak raids. 20 years earlier, his home colony had been attacked by a Vorthak pack. Half the population had been killed before military forces arrived to drive the predators away. Where are the specimens? Vexatar demanded as soon as he entered the research station. They are not specimens, Woojin said firmly. Their names are Shadowclaw and Swift Strike. They are members of our research team. Vorthak cannot be team members. They are Class 5 hostile entities. Galactic law requires their immediate containment or termination. Vexatar's inspection team consisted of armed soldiers from 3 different species, all carrying weapons designed to stop large predators. They moved through the research station like they were hunting dangerous criminals. "I will see these creatures now," Vextar announced. Wujin led the group to the main laboratory where both cubs were working with engineer Minho on a complex piece of mining equipment. When the strangers entered, both Vorthak immediately moved to defensive positions around their human companions, but they did not attack. They did not even growl or show their claws. Instead, they waited. "Counselor Vextar," Wujin said formally, "may I present Shadowclaw and Swift Strike?" At the sound of their names, both cubs straightened up and performed a gesture that shocked everyone in the room. They placed their forearms across their chests and bowed their heads slightly. It was the traditional Vorthak greeting of respect, normally used only between pack leaders. "Impossible," breathed one of the soldiers. "Wild Vorthak do not show respect to other species." "These are not wild Vorthak," Dr. Choi Hyejin said. "They were raised with love and proper socialization. They understand concepts like respect, friendship, and cooperation." Counselor Vextar stared at the two creatures that should have been trying to kill everyone in the room. Instead, they stood calmly waiting to see if the visitors were friendly or hostile. "Demonstrate their intelligence," Vextar ordered. Wujin picked up a complex puzzle made of interlocking metal pieces. It was designed to test problem-solving abilities in different species. He handed it to Shadowclaw. The young Vorthak examined the puzzle for less than 30 seconds, then began manipulating the pieces with its four arms. Within 2 minutes, it had solved a puzzle that typically took most species over an hour to complete. Swift Strike was given a broken communication device and asked to repair it. Using tools designed for human hands, the cub carefully disassembled the device, identified the damaged components, and rebuilt it into working condition. "They are not just intelligent," Engineer Minho added. "They are helpful. Yesterday, they prevented a serious accident by noticing a gas leak that our sensors missed. And when Dr. Park was injured last month, they stayed with her for 3 days until she recovered," Dr. Hyejin said. "They show empathy and care for beings outside their own species." Counselor Vexatar walked slowly around both cubs, studying them carefully. These creatures looked exactly like the monsters that had destroyed his home colony. Same body shape, same claws, same powerful build. But their behavior was completely different. "Show me how they interact with humans during normal activities," he said finally. For the next hour, the inspection team watched as Shadowclaw and Swift Strike went about their daily routine. They helped prepare meals in the kitchen, carefully, using their claws to slice vegetables without damaging the cutting surfaces. They assisted with equipment maintenance, using their strength and flexibility to make repairs impossible for humans alone. Most remarkably, they played. Swift Strike chased, a ball thrown by Dr. Park, bringing it back like a well-trained dog. Shadowclaw solved increasingly complex puzzles that Dr. Hyejin presented, purring with satisfaction when it succeeded. "This changes everything we thought we knew about predator species," one of the council scientists admitted. "If Vorthak can be successfully socialized, how many other supposedly hostile species might be capable of integration?" But Counselor Vextar remained skeptical. What happens when they reach full adult size? What happens when their hunting instincts fully develop? These are still predators, no matter how intelligent they appear. As if summoned by his words, both cubs suddenly became alert. Their heads turned toward the main door of the laboratory, and they made soft warning sounds. "Something is wrong," Shadowclaw said in carefully pronounced human words. "Danger outside." Everyone stared in shock. The cubs had never spoken before, only communicated through gestures and sounds. "They can talk?" Vexatar asked in amazement. "Apparently so," Wujin replied, just as surprised as everyone else. The danger Shadowclaw sensed turned out to be a minor landslide near the mining equipment, triggered by recent drilling operations. No one was hurt, but the cub's ability to Sense problems before humans noticed them added another layer to their impressive abilities. As the inspection team prepared to leave, Counselor Vextar made his decision. I will recommend to the Council that this experiment be allowed to continue under careful observation, but there will be conditions. Regular inspections, detailed reports, and immediate intervention if these creatures show any signs of reverting to wild behavior. That is all we ask, Wu Jin said gratefully. Do not make me regret this decision, Dr. Kim Wu Jin. The galaxy is watching what happens here. If you are wrong about these creatures, the consequences will be severe. After the council ship departed, the research team celebrated their victory. But Wu Jin knew this was only the beginning. Word of talking, intelligent Vorthak would spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Some species would be fascinated. Others would be terrified. As he watched Shadowclaw and Swift Strike playing together in the evening light, Wu Jin wondered what challenges tomorrow would bring. The cubs were growing larger and smarter every day. Soon they would be full adults, as large and powerful as the wild Vorthok that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The difference was that these two had been raised with love instead of violence. They knew what family meant. They understood cooperation and friendship. Wu Jin hoped that would be enough to change the galaxy's mind about predator species forever. 18 months after the discovery, Shadowclaw and Swift Strike had reached their full adult size. They now stood over 2.5 meters tall when upright, with powerful muscles beneath their dark scales. Their claws could slice through steel plates, and their teeth could crush bone. To any observer, they looked exactly like the terrifying predators that haunted galactic nightmares. Yet every morning, they still brought Dr. Kim Wu Jin his coffee and helped prepare breakfast for the research team. The Galactic Council had decided to conduct official evaluation tests. Dr. Bei Sujin arrived from the Core Worlds as the head examiner. She was the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology and had tested hundreds of species for intelligence and social integration potential. I must be honest with you, Dr. Wu Jin, she said during her first day at the research station. I did not expect to find what I have seen here. The reports seemed too incredible to believe. Dr. Sujin had watched Shadowclaw carefully paint a picture using brushes held in its claws. The image was crude by human standards, but it clearly showed the research station surrounded by stars. More importantly, it showed emotions. The warm colors suggested happiness and contentment. Art requires abstract thinking, Dr. Sujin explained. The ability to represent feelings and ideas through visual symbols. This is considered one of the highest forms of intelligence. Swift Strike had demonstrated its abilities by composing simple music on a keyboard modified for its claws. The melody was surprisingly pleasant, with complex rhythms that showed mathematical understanding. They are not just intelligent, Dr. Sujin concluded after a week of testing. They show creativity, empathy, and abstract reasoning at levels comparable to most advanced civilizations. But opposition to the project was growing stronger. Commander Krelvas of the Hegemony had arrived with a military escort, demanding that the Galactic Council take immediate action. He brought with him holographic records of Vorthak attacks on civilian colonies, showing the destruction and death that wild packs had caused throughout history. Look at these images and tell me these creatures can be trusted, Krelvas demanded during a heated council session held at the research station. Hundreds of thousands have died at Vorthak claws. These two may act civilized now, but their true nature will emerge eventually. These two have never harmed anyone, Dr. Wu Jin responded. They have saved human lives and contributed to our community for over a year. They are weapons pretending to be pets. When their hunting instincts fully mature, they will turn on you without warning. The argument might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by emergency alarms from the asteroid mining facility in orbit above the planet. This is Mining Platform 7, crackled the voice over the communication system. We have had a catastrophic collapse in Tunnel Section 12. 7 miners are trapped behind a debris wall. We cannot reach them with standard rescue equipment. Administrator, Lee Do-yun took the emergency call. What is the situation? The tunnel is too narrow for our heavy machinery. The debris is too heavy for manual removal. We estimate the trapped miners have maybe 6 hours of air left before they suffocate. Send up every rescue team we have available. Sir, we already tried. The tunnel is only wide enough for 1 person at a time, but it would take 20 people, working together to move the debris blocking the way. Our equipment cannot fit through the opening. Dr. Wu Jin looked at Shadowclaw and Swift Strike, who had been listening to the emergency broadcast. Both cubs understood the situation immediately. We can help, Shadowclaw said in its careful human speech. We are strong enough. We can fit through small spaces. Absolutely not, Commander Krelvas interrupted. I will not allow these predators near helpless victims. They could kill the trapped miners themselves. The miners will die anyway if we do nothing, Dr. Park Nari pointed out. Then we find another solution that does not involve trusting Vorthak. But there was no other solution. The rescue teams had already tried every option available. The trapped miners would die unless someone could reach them through the collapsed tunnel. Swift Strike stepped forward and addressed Commander Krelvas directly. Commander, you believe we are monsters. You think we will hurt innocent people. We understand your fear, but those miners need help now. Please let us try to save them. The sincerity in the young Vorthak's voice surprised everyone in the room. Even Krelvas seemed uncertain for a moment. If we save the miners, will you consider that we are not the monsters you think we are? Shadowclaw asked. After several minutes of heated debate, Councillor Vextar made the decision. The rescue attempt will proceed with both Vorthak participating, but they will be monitored constantly, and armed guards will be standing by. The journey to the orbital mining platform took 2 hours. Shadowclaw and Swift Strike had never been in space before, but they adapted quickly to the zero-gravity environment. Their multiple arms actually gave them advantages in navigating the cramped corridors of the mining station. The situation was worse than the initial reports indicated. The tunnel collapse had been caused by a gas explosion that weakened the structural supports throughout the section. The entire area was unstable and could collapse further at any moment. The opening to the trapped area is here, explained Chief Engineer Park Ji-hoon, pointing to a hole barely 1 meter wide. The debris pile behind it is at least 4 meters deep. Moving it requires strength and precision. One wrong move could cause another collapse that kills everyone. Shadowclaw squeezed through the narrow opening first. Its flexible body allowed it to navigate tight spaces that would be impossible for humans. Using its forearms, it began carefully removing debris piece by piece, testing each movement to ensure the tunnel remained stable. The work was incredibly dangerous. Loose rocks constantly fell from the damaged ceiling. Sharp metal fragments cut into Shadowclaw's scales, leaving trails of blue blood. The air was filled with toxic dust and gas fumes that made breathing difficult. But Shadowclaw continued working. After 6 hours of careful excavation, Shadowclaw had created a narrow passage through the debris. It was just wide enough for humans to crawl through, but the opening was still partially blocked by a massive steel beam that had fallen during the explosion. I cannot move this beam alone, Shadowclaw reported over the communication link. It is too heavy and the space is too small for leverage. Come back, ordered the rescue coordinator. We will try a different approach. Wait, Swift Strike said. I can fit through the passage. Together we can move the beam. The second Vorthak squeezed through the tunnel to join its companion. Working together, they managed to shift the heavy beam just enough to create a rescue passage. Beyond the debris wall, they found the 7 trapped miners. 3 humans, 2 members of the Centauri species, and 2 beings from the water world, of Aquatica. All were unconscious from lack of oxygen and toxic gas exposure. They are alive but barely breathing, Shadowclaw reported. We need to get them out immediately. What happened next became legendary throughout the galaxy. Shadowclaw and Swiftstrike spent next 12 hours carefully carrying each unconscious miner through the dangerous tunnel. The passage was so narrow that they had to move in complete darkness, guided only by their enhanced senses. Falling debris constantly threatened to bury them all. The most dangerous moment came when Swiftstrike was carrying the last miner, a human woman who had stopped breathing entirely. The tunnel ceiling began to collapse just as they reached the halfway point. Swiftstrike used its own body to shield the unconscious woman from falling rocks, taking severe injuries to its back and head. When the rescue was finally complete, all 7 miners had been saved, but Swiftstrike was badly hurt and bleeding from multiple wounds. "Why did you risk your life them?" Commander Krelvis asked as medical teams treated Swiftstrike's injuries. "These beings are not your species. They mean nothing to you." Swiftstrike looked at the commander with tired but determined eyes. "They mean everything to us. Every life has value. Every being deserves to go home to their family. That is what Dr. Wu Jin taught us." The rescued miners recovered fully from their injuries. When they learned that 2 Vorthak had risked their lives to save them, their reactions varied. Some were grateful, others were shocked. But none of them felt threatened by Shadowclaw and Swiftstrike. "They are heroes," said Miner Captain Lee Soo-young. "I do not care what species they are. They saved our lives when no one else could reach us." The rescue operation was broadcast throughout the galaxy. For the first time, billions of beings saw Vorthak acting as protectors instead of destroyers. The images of Shadowclaw and Swiftstrike carefully carrying unconscious miners to safety challenged everything the galaxy believed about predator species. Commander Krelvis remained silent during the return journey to Kepler 442b. When they arrived, at the research station, he approached Dr. Wu Jin privately. "I have spent my entire military career fighting wild Vorthak," he said quietly. "I have seen the destruction they can cause. I came here expecting to find weapons disguised as pets. And what did you find instead?" "I found 2 beings who risked everything to save strangers from 7 different species. I found creatures that could have easily killed the trapped miners, but chose to protect them instead." Krelvis looked out the window where Shadowk. 2 years after Dr. Kim Woo-jin first found 3 dying cubs in a mining crater, the galaxy was beginning to change in ways no one could have predicted. The successful rescue operation had been broadcast to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. For the first time, creatures that had been feared for millennia were being seen as heroes. Requests poured into the research station on Kepler 442b from every corner of civilized space. Not requests to study the Vorthak, but requests to learn human child-rearing techniques. "We have received over 3,000 applications this month," Dr. Park Nari reported during their weekly staff meeting. "Species from the Andromeda colonies want to send their young predator species cubs here for socialization training." Dr. Wu Jin looked at the list of applications with amazement. The Night Fang of Vela Prime, creatures that resembled giant black wolves with 6 legs and poisonous bite. The Iron Jaw Hunters from the Outer Rim, massive reptilian beings with armored hides and crushing jaws. The Crystal Spiders of the Nebula worlds, whose webs could slice through starship hulls. All of these species had been classified as irredeemably hostile by the Galactic Council. All of them were sending requests to have their young raised by humans. "The implications are staggering," said Dr. Choi Hyejin, who had been promoted to head of the new Interspecies Development Institute. "We are not just talking about Vorthak anymore. We could potentially change the relationship between civilized space and dozens of predator species." Shadowclaw and Swiftstrike had become celebrities throughout the galaxy. Their rescue of the trapped miners had been turned into documentaries, news programs, and even children's entertainment shows. But more importantly, they had begun teaching other predator cubs that arrived at the research station. The first non-Vorthak cubs to arrive were 3 young Night Fang from Vela Prime. The cubs were only a few weeks old, no bigger than house cats, but they already showed the elongated snouts and developing fangs of their species. Their parents had died in a mining accident, and the Vela authorities had planned to euthanize the cubs rather than risk raising them. "We offer them to you as an experiment," the Vela representative had said. "If human methods can socialize Nightfang, as they did with Vorthak, perhaps we have been wrong about many things." Shadowclaw took to teaching immediately. The giant Vorthak would lie patiently while the tiny Nightfang cubs climbed all over its back, learning through play how to control their natural hunting instincts. When the cubs became too rough or aggressive, Shadowclaw would gently correct them with soft sounds and careful movements. "They are natural teachers," Dr. Wu Jin observed. "They understand what these cubs need because they went through the same process themselves." Swift Strike specialized in teaching problem-solving and cooperation. It created simple puzzles and games that required the young predators to work together rather than compete. Cubs that would normally fight over food learned to share. Species that were natural enemies in the wild played together peacefully. But not everyone was happy with these developments. The Preservation Authority had built its power and influence on the premise that dangerous species needed to be contained or eliminated. For centuries, they had received massive funding to build prison planets and containment facilities for hostile life forms. The success of the socialization program threatened their entire reason for existence. Director Vex Molar of the Preservation Authority arrived at Kepler 442b with a team of lawyers and bureaucrats. His mission was to shut down the program using regulatory procedures and administrative delays. "These facilities do not meet standard containment protocols for Class 5 hostile entities," he declared after inspecting the expanded research station. "The security measures are inadequate. The living conditions violate 17 different preservation statutes." "The cubs are not prisoners," Dr. Wu Jin replied calmly. "They are students learning to live in civilized society. They do not need to be contained because they are not dangerous. All predator species are dangerous by definition. Your emotional attachment to these creatures has compromised your scientific judgment." The bureaucratic warfare continued for weeks. Every day brought new regulations, new inspections, and new demands for paperwork. The Preservation Authority was trying to strangle the program with administrative complexity. Meanwhile, more cubs continued to arrive. A pair of crystal spider. Hatchlings from the Nebula worlds came in a specially designed transport pod. 3 Ironjaw hunter cubs were delivered by a nervous freighter crew who refused to even look at their cargo. Each new species presented unique challenges. The crystal spider hatchlings needed specific mineral supplements in their diet and environmental conditions that mimicked their home nebula. The Ironjaw cubs required massive amounts of food and exercise to support their rapid growth. But in every case, the same pattern emerged. Cubs raised with love and proper socialization developed empathy, intelligence, and social cooperation. They learned to see other species as potential friends rather than prey or enemies. The breakthrough moment came when the first generation of socialized predator cubs began reaching maturity. The 3 Nightfang cubs were now the size of large dogs with fully developed hunting instincts and adult strength. According to every scientific study ever conducted, they should have become uncontrollable killers at this stage of development. Instead, they asked if they could help with the morning feeding routine for the newer cubs. "This changes everything. We know about predator psychology," Dr. Bei Sujin reported in her official evaluation. "Mature predator species that maintain social bonds and cooperative behavior represent a complete paradigm shift in xenobiology. The crystal spider hatchlings had grown into creatures the size of small vehicles, with legs that could punch through steel plates and web spinners that produced the strongest material known to science. They used these abilities to help build better habitats for incoming cubs and to create artistic sculptures that decorated the research station. Word of these successes spread faster than official reports could suppress them. Independent news services began broadcasting stories about the miracle of Kepler 442b, where deadly monsters learned to live as peaceful citizens. The political pressure became overwhelming. The Galactic Council called for a full investigation and formal hearings on the future of predator species policy. The hearings were held on the neutral world of Sanctum Prime, with representatives from over 200 species attending. Dr. Wujin was called to testify about his methods and results. "The evidence is clear," he told the assembled delegates. "Predator species are not inherently evil or uncontrollable. They are simply beings that evolved in harsh environments where aggression was necessary for survival. Given proper nurturing and socialization, they can become valuable members of galactic civilization." Commander Krelvas, who had once demanded the destruction of Shadowclaw and Swift Strike, spoke in support of the program. "I came to Kepler 442b expecting to find weapons disguised as pets," he testified. "Instead, I found beings who risked their lives to save strangers. I found creatures that could easily dominate others but chose to protect and teach instead. If we can transform natural predators into natural protectors, we have an obligation to try." The hearings lasted for months. Representatives debated ethics, safety, resource allocation, and the fundamental nature of consciousness and behavior. Some species strongly supported expanding the program. Others demanded its immediate termination. The final decision came down to a simple test. Shadowclaw and Swift Strike were brought to Sanctum Prime to demonstrate their abilities before the full Galactic Council. For 3 days, they underwent every test that Council scientists could devise: intelligence assessments, stress evaluations, moral reasoning challenges, and social interaction studies. They passed every test. On the final day of evaluation, Shadowclaw was asked to address the Council directly. The massive Vorthak stood before an audience of beings from across the galaxy. Many of them still flinched when they looked at its claws and teeth. But Shadowclaw spoke with quiet dignity and intelligence that could not be ignored. "Honored delegates," it said, in carefully pronounced galactic standard, "you fear us because of what our wild cousins have done. We understand this fear, but we ask you to judge us not by our species, but by our actions. We have lived among you for years without causing harm. We have saved lives, protected the innocent, and taught younger predators to choose cooperation over conflict. We are not asking you to forget the past, but to consider the possibility of a different future." Swift Strike added, "Every being deserves the chance to choose who they want to become. We were given that chance by humans who saw potential instead of problems. Now we ask you to give other young predators the same opportunity." The vote was close, but the socialization program was officially approved and expanded. The Galactics Council established the Interspecies Integration Initiative with Dr. Wujin as its director. Funding was provided to build similar facilities on 12 different worlds. The Preservation Authority was restructured from a containment organization into a rehabilitation and education service. Many of their prison planets were converted into socialization centers where adult predators could learn to integrate into galactic society. But the most significant change was cultural rather than political. For the first time in galactic history, when explorers discovered new predator species, the first question was not, how dangerous are they, but how can we help them integrate peacefully? The tradition of interspecies fostering began to spread beyond just predator species. Beings from hundreds of worlds started adopting cubs and younglings from other species, learning that family bonds could transcend biological boundaries. As Dr. Wujin watched Shadowclaw and Swift Strike playing with a mixed group of cubs from 12 different worlds, he realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Fear was being replaced by curiosity. Hatred was being replaced by hope. The 3 dying cubs he had found in a mining crater had grown up to become teachers, heroes, and ambassadors for a new way of thinking about what it meant to be a family. The galaxy was becoming a much more interesting place to live. 5 years had passed since Dr. Kim Woo-jin first knelt beside 3 dying cubs in a mining crater. What began as a simple act of compassion had grown into something that changed the entire galaxy forever. Kepler 442b was no longer a small mining colony on the edge of civilized space. It had become the most diverse world in the galaxy, home to over 300 different species living and working together in harmony. Where once there had been only humans and mining equipment, now there were sprawling cities filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size. The morning sun rose over New Harmony, the planet's capital city, illuminating parks where Vorthak. Cubs played with Nightfang pups and crystal spider hatchlings. Schools where young beings from dozens of species learned together. Markets where former predators sold artwork created with claws that had once been feared throughout the galaxy. Dr. Wu Jin, now director of the Galactic Interspecies Integration Initiative, stood on the observation deck of the Central Administration Building. Below him, the city bustled with activity that would have been unimaginable just a few years before. "Grandfather Wu Jin," called a familiar voice behind him. He turned to see Shadowclaw approaching, now a fully mature adult Vorthak standing nearly 3 meters tall. But walking beside the massive predator were 3 much smaller figures. Shadowclaw's own cubs, barely 6 months old and already showing the intelligence and social awareness of their father. "The morning class is ready to begin," Shadowclaw said. "We have 12 new arrivals from the Outer Rim colonies." The interspecies development centers had spread throughout the galaxy. There were now 47 facilities on different worlds, each specializing in helping young predator species learn to integrate into galactic civilization. The success rate was remarkable. Over 90% of socialized predator species became productive members of society. Swift Strike had become the director of the Emergency Response Division. Teams of socialized predators now served as rescue workers throughout civilized space, using their natural strength and abilities to help in disasters and dangerous situations. The sight of Vorthak and Nightfang working together to rescue earthquake victims had become common across the galaxy. "The new cubs are from the diamond caves of Rigel 7, Shadowclaw explained as they walked toward the education center. "Their species has never been successfully contacted before. The explorers found them after their parents were killed in a cave collapse." Dr. Wu Jin nodded. Each new species presented unique challenges, but the basic principles remained the same. Love, patience, and proper socialization could overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming. The education center was a vast complex of interconnected buildings designed to accommodate beings of different sizes and environmental needs. Aquatic species had water-filled classrooms. Desert dwellers had sand and heat chambers. Ice world natives had frozen environments maintained at sub-zero temperatures. But all the young beings came together in the central play areas learning that differences in appearance and biology did not have to mean conflict. Dr. Han Ji-woo, who had been Wu Jin's student and was now the head instructor for new arrivals, greeted them at the entrance. In her arms, she carried a small creature that looked like a living crystal with multiple faceted eyes. "This is Shimmerwing," she said, introducing the newest arrival. "Her species communicates through light patterns, but she is already learning. Basic galactic standard." The crystal creature pulsed with soft blue and green lights, and Jiwoo smiled in response. "She says she is happy to meet you, Director Wu Jin." Inside the main classroom, a remarkable scene was taking place. Young beings from 12 different predator species were working together on a collaborative art project. Ironjaw hunter cubs used their massive strength to move heavy materials. Nightfang pups used their speed and agility to fetch supplies. Crystal spiders wove intricate patterns that held everything together. What made the scene even more amazing was that these species had been mortal enemies in the wild for millions of years. Now their children played and worked together as if they had always been friends. "How many facilities are operational now?" Wu Jin asked Dr. Park Nari, who had become the administrative coordinator for the entire program. 47 active centers across 31 worlds, she replied, consulting her datapad. "We have requests for 15 more facilities, but we are limited by the number of qualified instructors." What about the adult integration programs? Those are showing remarkable success as well. The rehabilitation centers have processed over 2,000 adult predators in the past 3 years. The recidivism rate is less than 5%. This was perhaps the most surprising development of all. Adult predator species that had spent their entire lives as raiders and killers could be taught to live peacefully in civilized society. It required more time and specialized techniques, but it was possible. Former Vorthak pack leaders now worked as security consultants, using their knowledge of predator psychology to help protect colonies from wild attacks. Nightfang hunters had become explorers and scouts, their natural tracking abilities making them invaluable for mapping dangerous worlds. "Director, we have an incoming message from the Galactic Council," announced Communications Officer Lee Mina. "Counselor Vextar wants to speak with you directly." Wu Jin activated the communication link. Counselor Vextar's image appeared on the main screen, looking pleased despite his naturally stern expression. "Dr. Wu Jin, I have news that will interest you greatly. The Explorer Corps has made contact with a previously unknown species in the far reaches of the Magellanic Clouds. They appear to be highly intelligent but extremely aggressive. First contact protocols have failed completely." "What are you asking of us, Counselor?" "The Explorer Corps wants to try a different approach. Instead of treating these beings as hostile entities, they want to use your socialization methods. They are requesting a team of your most experienced instructors to attempt peaceful integration." Wu Jin considered the request carefully. Expanding their methods to entirely unknown species would be challenging, but it represented the ultimate test of everything they had learned. "We will send a team," he decided. "Shadowclaw and Swift Strike should lead it. They have the most experience with difficult cases." "Excellent. The transport ship will arrive next week." After the communication ended, Wu Jin walked through the various sections of the education center. In one room, teenage Ironjaw hunters were learning mathematics and engineering. In another, young crystal spiders were studying galactic history and cultural appreciation. The most touching scene was in the family quarters, where interspecies adoption had become common. Human families had adopted predator cubs. Aquatic species had taken in desert dwellers. Beings that should have been incompatible were raising each other's children with love and dedication. "It is remarkable, is it not?" said a familiar voice. Wu Jin turned to see Commander Krelvis approaching. The former military leader had become one of the program's strongest supporters and now served as security advisor for the integration centers. "When I first came here, I expected to find an abomination," Krelvis continued. "Humans playing with fire, creating super predators that would eventually destroy everything. Instead, I found a family." "That is what this has always been about," Wu Jin replied. "Family transcends species boundaries. The galaxy is becoming a very different place than the one I grew up in. My own children are now attending mixed-species schools. Yesterday, my daughter brought home a Nightfang cub for a playdate. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I would welcome a predator into my home, I would have thought they were insane. The changes went far beyond just predator-species integration. The success of interspecies families had led to greater cooperation in all areas of galactic society. Trade barriers between species had been reduced. Scientific collaboration had increased dramatically. Wars between different civilizations had become almost extinct. "Dr. Wu Jin," called out a small voice. He looked down to see one of Shadowclaw's cubs tugging at his coat. The young Vorthak was barely knee-high, but already showed the intelligence and gentle nature of its father. "Uncle Swift Strike is telling stories in the library," Cub said in perfect galactic standard. "Will you come listen?" "Of course," Wu Jin replied, allowing the cub to lead him toward the library. The library had become a gathering place where beings of all ages came to share stories from their homeworlds. Swift Strike was indeed telling a story, but the audience was remarkable. Dozens of young beings from 20 different species sat in rapt attention as the massive Vorthak described the adventures of brave explorers discovering new worlds. And that is how the brave captain discovered that the crystal beings were not monsters at all, but artists who wanted to share their beautiful creations with the galaxy, Swift Strike concluded. The young audience erupted in enthusiastic cheers and requests for another story. As Wu Jin watched this scene, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with 3 dying cubs and 1 human who decided that compassion was more important fear. Now it had grown into a galaxy-wide movement that was changing the fundamental nature of interspecies relations. Director Wu Jin said, Dr. Choi Hyejin approaching with a datapad full of reports. The latest STA